Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 82 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and we are coming to you once again from the international headquarters of GSM Services right here in downtown Gastonia. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We have another great, I guess I'll call it an initiative this week that we are discussing as we highlight the Gaston County Veterans Treatment Court. We have Chad Hawkins, John Greenlee, and Travis Page with us today. Chad is our Gaston County Sheriff. John is our Chief District Court Judge, and Travis is the Gaston County District Attorney. Chad, John, and Travis, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So what we really just kind of like to start with is just give us a little bit of background on yourself. John, maybe start with you. Just tell us anything you want to share about yourself, and then we'll get into the treatment court.
I've been a judge for almost 23 years. Grew up in Gaston County, as you know, Stephen.
Yep.
Classmates with your brother.
That's unfortunate,
Joel.
but
yes.
All right,
yes.
It's all good.
So I'm a lifelong resident, except for stints away at college and law school. Came back here to practice law, and eventually was elected to the bench, and have been there almost 23 years. I've been chief judge now for 8 years.
Okay, very good.
And I've been involved in a lot of initiatives and programs since I've been chief. This is the latest that our district attorney, Mr. Page, is taking the lead on, and I'm very excited about it.
All right, very good. Travis, what would you share about yourself?
Where to begin? So I'm from Cherryville. Grew up in Cherryville. Went to First Wesleyan Church in Cherryville.
Okay.
I graduated Cherryville High School, and father worked in the mills. Mother worked at Carolina Freight for a little while, and is now at the county police. My wife and I, we live in Belmont. Attend First Pres over there in Belmont. Went to Appalachian for undergrad, Carolina for law school. Practiced as an assistant DA for about 3 years. Started in Raleigh, came back home to Gaston County, and then went into private practice across the street at Arthurs and Foltz for about 9 years. And then when my predecessor retired, I was appointed by the governor to serve out the rest of his term as DA, and been doing that for about 18 months. I was reelected to a 4-year term last year, and really love the job. It's a lot of work, a lot of responsibility, but we're having fun doing it, and I think we're making a difference.
Good. Yeah, I have a daughter who is in her last semester at Appalachian.
Wow. Yeah. It's a great place.
Yes, she's had a good experience there. Chad, what about you, sir?
I'm a lifelong resident of Gaston County. Been in public safety over 30 years. Began in the fire service when I was actually 16 years old. Law enforcement, almost 29 years. Served in several different capacities over the years, from Cramerton Police Department, Lowell Police Department, City of Gastonia Police Department, and then took over Cherryville Police Department in 2013 after all the stuff that went on there.
Right.
And I spent 4 years as the police chief there, then went to Belmont, spent 6 years as the police chief there, and won the election back in the primary in May, and took office December the 5th. But so I live in Cherryville. I'm not from Cherryville, but my wife is. I had to intrude on Travis's territory there. But so we live there. I have 3 children, and so we just loving what I'm doing, and couldn't think of a better way to. At this point in my career, I couldn't think of a better place to be.
Well, good. Well, very good. And I appreciate you. Again, I appreciate you sharing that. And so we've got two at least that are in position relatively recently. Okay, that's exciting to hear. Then, sorry, John, you're the old guy here. Been in the same spot for a long time. So, listen, we're talking about the Gaston County Veterans Treatment Court. So, this question is obviously for all three of you. So, in the way we work here at this highfalutin podcast is you just talk over yourselves or whatever you want to do. But the main question is, so what is the initiative? What is Gaston Veterans Treatment Court? What is the mission? Maybe what is each of yours involvement? So maybe start with you, John, just because you're closest to me. Kind of share just any background about the initiative and anything you want to share, and then we'll just let all three of you kind of get into that.
A veterans treatment court was something, and a veterans court was something that I had thought about for several years. I was waiting for. I didn't necessarily know it was going to be Travis as the DA to come along, but I was ready for the right DA to come along, and that had the same interest.
I hope I was the right one.
Well, you were the right, but I didn't have you in my mind at the time because this was prior to everything. Yes, he's turned out to be the right one to come along to take the lead on this, and this is something that he's certainly taken the lead on. But I'm fully supportive and behind him all the way. It's something you see in court, in all the courts I do, especially criminal and traffic, DWIs, other types of drug cases. We see a lot of veterans.
Okay.
And in my experience, they have some unique problems. A lot of those, in my experience, were caused by especially combat veterans. We're at a time now where we're seeing a lot of folks out of the military that served. I mean, this definitely dates myself back to Desert Storm, but then we had Afghanistan and that long stay in Afghanistan. So certainly we had a lot of veterans that were transitioning out that had seen combat and had been in situations. And so I certainly started seeing the outcomes of that with alcohol issues, drug issues, PTSD. And so it was certainly something that I always dealt with veterans differently when they came before me. Certainly looked to provide them certain types of services or ask questions regarding what services they were accessing that are available for veterans, and looked at different things with veterans and what may be out there for them. But we didn't have really a formal process for it. And then, when Travis came on board, he came and talked to me about it because it's something he certainly is very interested in. And,
Gotcha.
And once he took the lead on it, I said, I'm on board 100%.
Okay, very good. So, Travis, how would you expand on that and maybe get into more of the details about specifically what is it? I did look up and saw a pretty good article about it that Cleveland County, I think, was doing something similar. And Catawba, excuse me, yeah.
Right.
So, just anything you want to share there, more details.
Absolutely. So, not long after I took office, maybe 2 or 3 months into the job, we had a couple cases involving veterans, and it opened the door for some conversations with a group of veterans who informed me of Catawba County.
Okay.
And they told me what was taking place up there, and granted, they were maybe the 4th or 5th county in the state to do it. There was one in Harnett County, one in Cumberland County, and you would expect there to be a veterans court there because you have a strong military presence there with the bases nearby. And so, but Asheville had also done it, and then Catawba had done it. And so they told me a little bit about it, and I'm kind of somewhat familiar with the recovery court model from the drug standpoint, because we have drug treatment courts in counties throughout the state as well. And that's a model that's been around for a while, which a veterans treatment court kind of looks to build on that model. It's just tailored specifically to veterans. But anyway, the initial question I had was, well, do we have enough veterans coming through the courthouse and enough veteran population here in Gaston County to support it? And so we looked at Catawba County, their numbers. They had around 10,000 veterans receiving VA services in Catawba County. We looked at the numbers here in Gaston County. We have just under 14,000, which is like 5.8% of the population, Gaston County. And those are just the veterans we know of through the census and through the VA. There are probably a lot more veterans here in Gaston County, if I were to imagine. So my thinking was, if Catawba County could support something like this, then we ought to be doing it here as well. And so, a veterans treatment court, if you think of court traditionally, it's an adversarial process. You have a prosecutor who represents the state, a defense lawyer who represents the defendant. We're arguing that you should lock somebody up, throw away the key, that sort of thing, pushing for law and order. You got a judge like Judge Greenlee who's going to set up there and make a decision. It's adversarial. We're arguing back and forth. Treatment court model kind of throws that upside down. And the purpose of a treatment court is to rehabilitate the defendant that's coming through court, to make a difference, to change their life, to use more real terms here. But we don't want to see this person come back. So many of the faces And I bet you Judge Greenlee, if you talk to him, I bet you if you talk to Sheriff Hawkins, they've arrested the same people over the course of their career many times. They've sentenced folks to jail multiple times. They can give you names just one after another, I'm sure. The goal for a Veterans Treatment Court is to reduce recidivism by 75%. If you look at other treatment courts across the state, those are the numbers that they're working at, even in the 80s. And what I mean by recidivism is you've changed this person's life. You've taken them from a life of addiction or mental health, just not addressing mental health issues. And the resulting criminality, the crimes that they're committing because of those issues, you've addressed the root cause of it, and so you hope to prevent future crime. It's really a proactive approach to the courthouse, and we use the courthouse and the law as really a tool to connect those veterans to the resources that they desperately need.
All right, so I heard a lot there and a lot to unpack, but before maybe we swing back and talk a little more about that, Sheriff Hawkins, I mean, talk to our listeners about your involvement, your office's involvement, and just how do you view this initiative or program? And
well, I see our role in law enforcement a little bit more unique because I'm really focused on mental health and substance abuse and disability awareness training. And from working the streets for years, I've been face-to-face with them long before they get to these gentlemen here. And so I think that our involvement starts in trying to keep them from getting there to begin with. And so that's what my focus is, to try to provide them with resources and to work with them, because most of them are suffering from mental health or dependency issues. And if we can provide them resources. Now, once they get in our facility, what our goal is, one, we want to identify them. We want to make sure they don't slip through the cracks. So if our staff, and actually that's something that we just did yesterday, is make sure it's in place that when a veteran comes in, we make sure that's in their file, so that when they're released, we want to provide them with resources and make sure that they get involved in the Veterans Court system, and also make sure that they leave there with resources to help them get the help that they need and try to get them to the right places. So we're very involved with crisis intervention training, which focuses on the de-escalation pieces and also the mental health, and providing resources, and not just saying, hey, here's a pamphlet, but we can actually walk them through. We have we try to get everyone involved in crisis intervention, trained in crisis intervention. I actually have instructors in my office that train everyone in this specific topic. So that's kind of our focus is, deal with them on the streets, get them the resources, but also let them know, look, if you're facing these issues, you're having trouble, you're getting to court, you don't have the means to get to court, make sure that they understand, hey, don't just think you're going to jail if you go to court. We're trying to get you help. So I think the education piece on our end, that's really where I want our focus to be. And like I say, unfortunately, if they do make it to our facility, we want to make sure that they understand what Veterans Court is and be able to provide them with those resources.
All right, that's okay. That's good. That's a lot of good information, a lot of information to unpack. So how long has this initiative been going on here in Gaston County?
So we really started to move forward with it last fall, last October, and since then we've assembled kind of a motley crew of folks from the courthouse, from law enforcement, from the community. Chief District Court Judge Greenlee here, Roxanne Rankin, our clerk of court. We've got folks from the veterans community that maybe work for Gaston County Veterans Services. We've got a grant writer from the Pat Laws from Gaston County working with us, and folks from Partners Behavioral Health, trying to bring in folks from all kinds of different stakeholders that maybe have something to contribute, either a perspective from law enforcement or from the medical community or treatment providers that we're looking at bringing in. And we've had monthly meetings since around October to kind of formulate a policy.
Gotcha.
And so really we're looking at the who, what, when, where, and how. If you go back to elementary school and writing a narrative.
Right.
And so who are we going to service? What criteria are we going to have for those folks? We're going to accept any veteran, or is it going to be the ones that were honorably discharged? What types of offenses are we going to consider? We're not going to consider every offense. We're not going to run someone through a veterans treatment court and allow them to earn a dismissal of a murder charge or a sex offense or
Sure.
something like that.
It's contextual, right? Whatever the
Right.
context is for
And
the
so-
circumstance.
And really, the crimes that we see our veterans committing are more along the lines of substance abuse. They're drug possession cases, maybe offenses related to homelessness as well, trespassing, resisting an officer, public intoxication, things of that nature. You may see some domestic stuff as well, misdemeanor domestic cases, where folks with a mental illness are taking it out at home, and you're really seeing it fester there, the issues that they've brought back from Afghanistan or Iraq. But those types of cases, we're going to be consulting with the victims in those cases and making sure that they're on board with what we're trying to do and the help that we're trying to get our veterans. But we've developed criteria for that. We really where we are right now is working to solidify and finalize their medical partners, and we're looking at options there as far as the how, I guess you could say, how are we going to rehabilitate those folks, and that's the final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate. I think I've said it on this, depending on our guests, more than once. I've talked about my charmed life. I'm not a veteran. I haven't been in that position to have to do that, but I'm sure grateful for those who do. And I do read a lot. We are very supportive of law enforcement here at our company and the military in general. And it's hard to comprehend for somebody like me really what they have to deal with and what they experienced, and then try to come back to whatever this new reality is. So is that your experience, is that you're seeing, getting these veterans in front of you that acclimating back into whatever this life is, and that we're just supposed to expect them to just come here and work at GSM like it's no big deal, everything that they experienced, right? And that doesn't, what I know now, that seems a stretch for so many. Is that kind of what you're seeing when you're out, both Judge Greenlee and Chad, kind of what are you seeing out there with that?
I mean, I'm definitely seeing that. My thoughts on it, frankly, have changed a lot. I mean, I've been a judge for a long time, and so I've evolved, I hope, since I first became a judge. And I've gone through training over the past several years in different contexts, in the context of children and the trauma that children suffer, and how the trauma that children suffer can affect them, obviously while they're still children, but into their teens and even into their adult life. And so that's trauma-informed training, and it's kind of a real big movement now in the state and in the court system, championed by our Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Paul Newby, is trauma-informed courts. And this is a new concept. When I became a bench, and the judges reviewed as, I had old judges when I first became a judge says, look, you're a judge, you're not a social worker, you're not the DA, you're not the defense lawyer, you're not a social worker, you're the judge. And so that has a connotation of, we just rule. We don't really worry about
hardline interpretation.
Hardline interpretation. We don't worry
Yeah.
about what happened, why you got here, why you did what you did. We only worry that if you did what you did and it's a crime and you're found guilty of it or plead guilty to it.
There's no what's next.
What's next? It was there's a sentence.
Well, there is a what's next.
There's a what's next.
It's a black and white.
It's a black and white. And that's changed a lot, and I've changed a lot. And I think that one of the things is going through this trauma-informed training of people, everyone that comes in front of you, veterans and non-veterans alike, come in front of you as individuals with a history. And unfortunately, a lot of the folks we see in the courthouse have a trauma history: child abuse, sexual abuse, drug abuse, domestic violence, witnessing horrible things. And that was eye-opening to me. And certainly I've tried to do that with everyone that comes in front of me, and change the way I talk to people and actually try to find out, what maybe is behind this situation, and try to craft a judgment or a sentence that tries to meet their needs. Look, as Travis and the sheriff both know, there are some folks that come in front of you on certain types of crimes with certain criminal records that I really can't worry about that part of it. I mean, there's a protection of the public aspect that trumps a lot of things.
Absolutely.
But that's not the majority of the cases that come in front of me in district court.
That's the ones that most people hear about.
Oh, sure.
Too.
Oh, no, those are the ones that make the news and get the newspaper.
Yep.
But that's not the majority. Overwhelming majority are people, regular people,
And the ignorant layman like me thinks that's all you see.
No, it's not all.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not. Yeah.
And so it's how you deal with people. It's how you talk to people. It's the nature of getting to know their stories and trying to get to how can we make sure that we deal with your trauma that you never dealt with, you never had an opportunity to deal with, the services were never made available to you. And, I wish we had it for everyone. And I try to do it individually in court as much as I can, but as everyone in this room that's in the court system knows, we have a lot of cases, and we are very busy. So it would be great if we could take the time with every single person that comes in front of you. The truth is you can't. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. There's not enough hours in the day or people to process it. You try to do it on the more serious cases and the cases where you think you can identify. And then with veterans, what I found too with veterans is, as you started looking into it, our government, both our federal government especially and our state government to some extent, have certainly made available additional resources, have put a focus on this and said, I'm sure in recognition of their service to our country, that we have additional services. We have things available that aren't available to non-veterans. But I've learned recently especially that a lot of veterans have never accessed these services.
Yeah.
These are free services that can help them with housing and mental health treatment and jobs. And they just never access those free services that they've earned according to the way our structure is set up in our government, that they've earned due to their service, and they don't access them. So my hope is with this process that we get people, the veterans, into what is been there for them for a long time. I mean, we aren't creating something new. I mean, there are veteran services.
Yeah.
The VA is just the tip. It's also shocking to me the amount of folks that don't take advantage of the VA benefits that they have. Healthcare, mental health care. That's something that we hope to change a lot with this program too.
Sheriff Hawkins.
Well, Judge, that's something that it's very interesting that you bring that up because they don't take advantage of these services, but we do a very poor job of explaining and making these services available to them. I was speaking to someone from the Veterans Office the other day, and the government has made most things, put most things on computers. And not a lot of your veterans have access to computers. So therefore, they are unable to sign up for these services unless they go to certain facilities. So I think that we have to do a better job of explaining them. Also, something that has a negative effect, we do not have a base really that's close to us. So a lot of services that a lot of your military folks, it's readily available to them, we don't have that luxury here. And so, when we deal with these people out on the streets, we don't get to deal with them when they're cleaned up and they're going to try to impress the DA and the judge. We get to see them, what I call very raw. And a lot of times they will really just share with you the trauma. And if you think about that, most of them have traveled to so many countries and lived in conditions that none of us could ever even imagine.
Right.
And then they come back, as you said, they come back and they try to acclimate, and they're basically just dumped off and said, hey, figure it out. Well, some people have a strong support system of families and, friends, and then some, and they have jobs, and then some don't, and they come back with substance abuse problems, which I keep going back to that because that's what I see. The majority of our issues start with the substance abuse problems, then leads into a lot of the other issues that we see. So I think we could do a better job in getting them and helping them understand the resources without a computer system. And like I said, this is coming from, Veteran Affairs, who are saying, that these veterans, you have especially the elderly, they have no access to this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think we could really make part of our plan, is to find a way to really streamline these services and have places where they can go to, expand those places they can go to get that assistance. And that's part of what that I really want to focus on. That unfortunately, like I said, we want to keep them out of our facility, but if they are in our facility, we provide them with those resources and try to lead them in that direction and make it a lot easier for them, because a lot of them could get more help. They just don't know how.
They don't know how, don't know where to go, don't know who to ask.
Right.
Is it fair to say, too, that if I've learned, being fortunate to be on 81 of the episodes here, we've dealt with some of the community issues, and I would imagine that there's still this stigma, or maybe even it could be worse. Again, I'm not in the military, so this is somewhat just guessing, but still that stigma of, especially on the mental health side, of asking for help or admitting that you need some help. And that culture is, I'm old enough to remember the suck it up culture. Suck it up and deal with it, man, especially when it comes to men. We seem to be, I don't know, what's the word?
Stubborn.
But we're not far.
I was going to say dumber, and more stubborn, but yeah, in general, that's I think that's an issue that we struggle with, and so is it fair to say that you do have to, individuals that are seeking help, or you're trying to help them, they do have to admit that they need some help,
right?
On some level, right? I mean,
and actually, that's the first step of getting into the Veterans Treatment Court, is an admission of wrongdoing, and essentially a admission that you need help.
That's tough. I mean, that's tough.
The first step's always the hardest step.
Yeah.
And once they've made that admission and placed on either a deferred prosecution program, or if they pled guilty to the charge, then and then we get to work. We surround them with the resources that they need, and to determine that, we perform a risk needs assessment to identify what's going on in their life, and help them articulate the things that are so hard to articulate.
Right.
Help them identify those needs that they have, because again, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of looking at yourself in the mirror to make that determination and know what you need help with. But the courthouse, it's one of the tools that our society has in our toolbox, and the way I see it. And it can serve a lot of different purposes. We can deter people from preventing future crime by, imposing stiff sentences on drug traffickers and violent offenders. But it's also, like the sheriff said, it's an avenue for us, or a way for us to connect the people to the resources that they need. And that's essentially what this Veterans Treatment Court looks to do. And not only does it look to prevent crime, but also looks to reduce the amount of inmates that we have over in that jail, and which could be a tremendous cost savings to the sheriff and to the county and its taxpayers.
Yeah, it's like so many organizations I'm involved with, or I've talked to. Some of these, it would be nice not to require this, right? It would be nice that it's not needed, but the reality is it also fair to say that by the time some of these individuals are getting to you guys, this is maybe they're getting to a low point. And my experience tells me that is sometimes, unfortunately, is what's required to get somebody to take some action. I mean, I imagine when they're in front of you, there's a problem, right? Or they've gotten to a point where, something needs to happen, something needs to change.
Well, I mean, that's a lot in the court system. In any type of specialty court, which is what Veterans Court will be. We have several specialty courts in Gaston County we've set up, but is you typically get a rock bottom place. Yeah. You get where you, unfortunately, by the time that we see a lot of folks in these specialty court situations, it's, if I don't try this, I might be going to prison.
Gotcha. Yep.
I've messed around as a first offender and then a second offender, and done things to the point where I might lose a large portion of my life to prison or jail, or I'm so bad right now I might die. So yeah, we get a lot of those folks, and with veterans, that to me, it's any type of trauma, as I've learned. I'm not a veteran. Just like I'm not luckily I've lived a very charmed life, Stephen. Like you said, I consider myself extremely fortunate and lucky. I've never witnessed domestic violence. I've never had a close family member murdered or shot. And in the process I went through with the trauma training was, what that must do to someone. Just an individual who witnesses domestic violence or sees a family member or a friend or lives in a neighborhood where they see someone shot and killed on a regular basis or stabbed. what that must do to you as a child and as a young adult, as an adult. But with veterans, you know, I have a good friend that went to high school with, retired in the past 2 years from the Navy. He was a Navy SEAL.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
I know. I'm sure you do. And, you know, we've had conversations, and, you know, it's some of the things he's dealt with, it boggles the mind. And, you know, I think it's part of the military training, too, that creates this. And I think it's necessary to have an effective military in a combat situation. Yeah. But, you know, he's trained, as always, combat military personnel are trained. The person gets shot and killed next to you. Well, you can't just curl up in a ball and stop. I mean, you have to put that aside.
You can't deal with it.
You can't
right
deal.
then.
You can't
That's
deal
right.
with it. You have to keep going to protect yourself and your fellow comrades and to accomplish whatever mission. So, you know, if that's how you're trained and that's how you're taught to just push it aside and keep going, I can imagine when you do finally process out or leave combat or get back into the world, the regular day-to-day life of going to the grocery store and going to a regular job or picking up your kids from school, and you've pushed this stuff aside for so long because you had to, I think it can come out in some very, very destructive ways.
And a side piece of that, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jocko Willink. I don't know if you know who Jocko Willink is, and I think he served with the gentleman we're talking about.
Yes.
And I'm a big podcast listener here. I read all his books, but something else that we forget about is the camaraderie that they lose. That is such a close-knit community. And now they're put out here, and they that's something that I've read and talked to individuals about, that that's gone now. And that's another reason that they may struggle to deal with getting back into what we see as a normal day-to-day stuff, right? And it's just not the case. So we've covered a lot of stuff here. So if you look ahead a little bit, you look ahead a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, or whatever, and you're looking back to today in the progress that we hope is going to be made with this initiative. How would you define success? I mean, what would that? I'm probably throwing a question out there that, and just for the record, Naomi gave you guys questions. I have no idea what those questions were, probably. So, and I see that Travis brought like 30 pages worth of notes over there that I should have figured if an attorney was going to bring the. But my point is, yeah, how would you?
It's all pictures, though.
Yeah.
How would you define success? Well, maybe that's good. Maybe that would I could follow that probably. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? What either success story? What would a success story look like? Maybe that's a better way to word it.
So, looking just numbers, we're looking at maybe a 75% reduction in recidivism of our veterans. That means we're working with veterans and we're keeping them out of the court system. For the sheriff, it means 25 fewer inmates a year, which translates to 9,000 beds a year. Sheriff, you could probably do a lot more with that
Millions
money.
of dollars.
Yeah. So that's if you're talking numbers, but I think most importantly, what you're talking about is lives changed, families changed, which we know from what Judge Greenlee has spoken about with being trauma informed and learning about ACEs and adverse child experiences. You know, a lot of these veterans are fathers, they're mothers. We're improving their homes and the homes that their kids are growing up in. And so you're looking to have an exponential effect across this community, looking to prevent future crime and future
break that cycle potentially.
Exactly, break the cycle. And we know it's not just criminality that comes from homes where there's domestic violence and homes where there's drug abuse. There's also health conditions too. Kids that grow up in those environments more likely to be obese, more likely to have heart disease, PTSD themselves. And so it's not just a crime issue, it's a public health issue as well.
Yeah, stress is a killer. I mean, it's absolutely just, and when you're dealing with all these exterior things besides just putting food on the table or whatever the case may be, yeah, it's
Yeah, anecdotally, I remember during training for Trauma Informed, there's a great presentation that they do in this movie called Resilience that just always strikes me. I've seen it and I've actually done presentations to the judges' conferences and different things on resilience and Trauma Informed. And, you know, imagine you're a child crossing the street, and a good level of stress is necessary. It's actually healthy. It saves your life a lot of the times. And you see a bus coming towards you, well, you jump out of the way. And that causes a lot of stress, but that stress just saved your life. But imagine if you jumped out from in front of that bus and there's another bus. You got to jump out in front of that bus and there's another bus.
Yeah.
So you're always jumping away from buses that are getting ready to hit you. And if that's your life, then when you go to some place that is safe, that is calm, school, work, but you're at this heightened sense of stress, toxic stress at that point, that you always feel like a bus is coming at you, you have to jump out of. I can't imagine what it's like to just do normal, everyday things with that level of stress.
Yeah, the stuff
in
we
your
take,
body.
like I mentioned, the stuff that we take for granted, right?
Right. Everyday normal things. A normal conversation with someone that may be totally normal for us, there may be things during that conversation that trigger you. Words, phrases, tone of voice. There's all kinds of things that we just don't think about. And that's one thing I learned a lot is, a judge can be a trigger from the bench, because a lot of times we're stern and we're loud, and we certainly have a certain level of not putting up with certain things. But that has to change sometimes when you're dealing with folks with this level of toxic stress and trauma in their life, because I don't want to add additional trauma to them.
Yeah.
Again, and we're talking about the majority of the cases. I'm not talking about the cases
Sure.
that you see in the news.
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes trauma from the bench is necessary.
Yeah. Also, my experience, again, I'm biased with this statement, so this is not the opinion of GSM or anything associated with, but sometimes there's stories that make it that probably shouldn't be making it on the news. Also, that might be blown up a little bit or out of proportion. But anyway, that's just my opinion. So you guys have gone through, a normal question, you guys have kind of gone through all of them. So, and I'm going to not let, we've got Roxanne Rankin in the background. She's trying to hide behind the camera because she was on episode, I don't remember what episode it was, Mechanical Women's Club. So if you want to see Roxanne in person, you can see her episode. Is there anything, because you're the one that kind of brought this together for us here today, anything that I haven't asked that I should have asked, or have you been on your phone back there not paying attention? I'm just kidding. Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. In fact, this room is full of Gaston County natives except for one, Naomi.
Oh.
So, in all seriousness, is there something I haven't asked that I should have asked? Something else you'd like to share? Before we kind of move on, we're going to shift gears briefly before we'll finish up with making sure our listeners know. And maybe a question would be that I just thought of is, I'm assuming somebody's coming through the court system to this point. Is that something that automatically occurs, or you're assessing, these individuals as they come through? If they're a candidate, is that the right phrase maybe?
Absolutely. And so we've got a couple of different avenues to where we can get referrals for the program.
Okay.
Really, it starts with the sheriff's office at the jail. One of the questions that they ask inmates coming into the jail, right, Sheriff, is, are you a veteran?
And then we're going to put that in their release packet.
Gotcha.
So that everyone keeps track and doesn't lose sight if they're a veteran.
Absolutely. And then most of the time they hire an attorney or they're appointed an attorney. We're going to have a lot of referrals either from the DAs handling the specific case or the defense lawyer representing that particular client. And then we get them into court, and court essentially bi-weekly for, one of the huge differences is not just the change in the adversarial nature where it's more everyone working together towards a common goal, but it's also the frequency of how often Judge Greenlee will see a particular defendant or veteran. Judge Greenlee may sentence someone in regular court to probation and not see him again. A veteran, they're going to come back every 2 weeks, at least initially.
Okay.
We're going to keep our hands and our eyes on them just to track their progress and have status reports, and also encourage them too. One of the things that you touched on earlier is a huge component to successful Veterans Treatment Corps. You spoke about the camaraderie and losing that.
Yep.
And so one of the things, especially your veteran listeners out there too, that may be listening or watching this podcast, one of the things that we need and we're going to have for this thing to be successful is support from our veteran community in the form of mentorship. And so if you go up to Catawba County or Harnett or Asheville, you'll walk into a courtroom in their Veterans Treatment Court, and you'll see a full packed courtroom. And you may only see 15 or 20 names on the docket, but the other people that are in the courtroom are veterans, mentors for these folks that are helping them find a place to stay, helping them find a job, and also just being that person that answers the phone at 10 o'clock or later when they're looking to do
maybe they've overcome some of these obstacles that
they've overcome the same demons. They've beat them, and they're just essentially the light at the end of the tunnel for these veterans that are going through the process now. If I stick to it, I can be right here where my friend is and how he's overcome it. And so a source of inspiration, a source of comfort, and also just someone to help keep the train on the track.
So maybe more of I love this word shepherding from a leadership standpoint is something that there's a great book called The Way of the Shepherd that we studied here at GSM last year or 2 years ago. And it sounds like it's more of a potential shepherding path as opposed to your sentence, you're on probation, see ya.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, historically, I think it's proven that those type of staying connected, right? Staying connected and helping somebody along the way, along the path is more successful typically.
And what we're looking at is essentially a 5-phase process. Early on, there's a lot more court intervention. Phase 1, but as you progress through the treatment court towards phase 5, then you're looking at maybe coming back to court only so often, every few months or so, but then also you're in a stage where we're talking gainful employment, we're talking about housing, independent housing, and so it's a process.
Okay, well, very good. So anything else, gentlemen, you'd like to add before we move on?
One thing, I think one of the important things in best practices that we've read up on in veterans treatment courts is having as many veterans involved as possible. Yeah. Not just as mentors, but as the people running the program, the people in authority.
Gotcha. Okay. If
you will. I'm not a veteran, but I know we have one of the defense attorneys that's going to be involved, Lance Williams, is a veteran, and he's very excited. We had from the city police, who obviously serve the biggest population in this county. City police deal with more, and certainly they deal with a large part of the homeless population, which unfortunately a large percentage of that are veterans. We have veterans from the police that are also military veterans.
Adam Hudson.
Yeah, Adam Hudson. We want as many veterans in the positions of authority so that it's not looking like, well, you can't relate to what I'm going through. You have no idea what the military is like, and that's true. I do not. That's why, luckily, this past January 1, I swore in our newest district court judge, Gus Anthony, who's a veteran. So I think having a veteran lead the court when you actually start having the court sessions and you're going in front of the person and the judge is talking to you. That's why I will be assigning him to actual handle.
Gus, he's terrific.
Yeah, handle the actual court. He's a veteran. As many veterans as possible, I think, is extremely helpful.
That's a great point. Yeah,
something that we
go ahead.
Something that we do, and it's along those lines. And I've already had initial meetings with this. Is we have a lot of veteran law enforcement officers. So I've already had a kickoff meeting with this, putting our veterans, because they're the ones going to be dealing with these folks generally frontline. And even looking at a way with us communicating with the veterans to find out, what are those triggers? What are those things that, agitate the situations? And our veterans understand a lot of that, law enforcement officers. So we're even looking at having something identifying on their uniform so that a veteran can recognize them, and there's already
a connection,
some connection there. And so that's something I held one of those meetings months ago, and that's something I'm looking at continuing, because we have a lot of veteran and law enforcement in this county.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, I appreciate that. So we're going to we talk about some heavy topics on some of these episodes, and hopefully that again, maybe the best thing that might come to, maybe there are some veterans out there that are going to hear this and maybe see an opportunity or feel called to come, volunteer or help and get connected to you. But we do like to shift gears here, and especially since you guys are all Gaston County originals. We got these questions that we like to ask, and just because we can, and there's really no rhyme or reason to it, but we're going to, I don't know, I'm not going to, what are we going to call it this week? This is the Veterans Speed Round of Question. All right, Naomi, that's the best I got. So we'll start with Judge Greenlee. We'll start with you on this. Again, this is what everybody wants to know, family, other judges, anybody in the court system, and friends. I mean, this is serious stuff. Favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
Black cherry.
Oh, that's a pretty popular answer, actually. Travis?
Banana.
We've had a few people say that.
Scoop of grape, scoop of lemon. You got to mix them together.
Grape and lemon together.
Absolutely.
That is an absolute first. We've had grape. Actually, grape might be the most popular answer, which is stunning. After 82 episodes, I had no idea. I knew it was such a thing, but I knew it because it was my mother, or is my mother's favorite.
I've never had grape.
I haven't either.
Try the two together.
So that's interesting. So, Sheriff Hawkins, will stay with you. Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Sundrop.
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 Cheerwine.
Okay. Again, we've only had Cheerwine as a unanimous one time, but I appreciate you screwing up the unanimous decision there. Judge Greenlee, favorite local restaurant?
Villa Roma.
Oh, yeah.
That shows I'm a Gastonia boy.
Yeah.
I'm not from Sherriff or Belmont. I'm pretty much Gastonia.
Like where we can brown bag it.
Yep.
Probably the one around the corner, Shrimp Boat.
Shrimp Boat is good. My guy I grew up with, Todd Thomas runs that now. We're the same age. Sheriff Hawkins?
Well, Tony's, come on.
Wow, the double. Hey, listen, I can't argue with
well
that.
Played.
And the problem with some of these places, they're so close to here, right, and to the courthouse, and to these.
You put us on the spot here.
Some of them I can practically walk to, right? And so, Sheriff Hawkins, favorite outdoor activity or favorite park here in Gaston County?
Outdoor activities. Well, I love to fish. I never have time to do that.
Yeah.
Also, ride a Harley. So.
Oh, ride a Harley. Okay, that might be the first that we've heard that on the podcast. Sir?
I like to fish, and I like to play golf, or at least try to play golf.
Okay. Anywhere particular?
Gaston every now and then.
Okay.
I used to live at Crabber Mountain for a little bit,
Okay.
like that. But Crowder's Mountain, Cherryville's my home course.
Yeah.
9-hole track. And
Unfortunately, I haven't swung a golf club in like 6 years or something. Sir?
Hiking, Crowder's Mountain.
I was just there last week.
A lot of hiking and golf, usually at the city.
Okay, cool. All right, this is my question that I ask every episode, and there is only one correct answer, but I'll ask it anyway. And sometimes we get some modified answers that we will accept. But UNC, Duke, or NC State?
Duke.
Give me something.
Oh, absolutely. Gosh.
Travis.
Carolina all the way. Born and bred.
Oh, boy. I knew there was a problem with this
I want to
episode.
interrupt and say that my wife is a Carolina fanatic, undergrad and grad school there.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, I married a Tar Heel, so I can't. I'm careful with my words.
Carolina. Is there any other team?
Oh, gosh, this is
You watched the game last night. I can't speak Duke.
Oh, man.
Duke got killed by Miami the other night.
Maybe-
Can't say anything.
maybe this last 45 seconds we can edit out of the episode.
Especially when you said that dirty word.
I'm an NC State graduate, so
Hey, I'm an App State guy, though, too. So I'm a Mountaineer as well.
yeah, that's a popular answer. I will sometimes we will allow other answers on occasion. It just depends as long as.
And I'm a Pirate. I'm an East Carolina guy, but
That's what I was afraid of. I
Yeah.
think I knew that. I was hoping
Yes.
you wouldn't bring that up.
yes.
Actually,
So as a Wolfpacker,
That's-
back in our day, that was a heated rivalry.
yeah, it's probably not as heated now, but
No.
yeah, back in the day, when our stadium was destroyed by a bunch
I
of
may have been at that game.
a bunch of hooligans from.
I may
Greenville?
I may have been there.
I was still in high school
Hypothetically.
then, but Joel was there.
I know he was.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on from that, I don't know, lead balloon question. Sheriff Hawkins says something. Can you share something very few people know about you?
Something that very few people know about about me. I don't know.
That's a stumper sometimes.
Well, something that it kind of relates to what we're talking about. I actually, as a young child, I was homeless.
Really?
One time.
That is interesting and unexpected answer.
Yes. Yeah.
Travis?
Thank God I was able to overcome that.
Yeah, very good. Good for you.
Goodness gracious.
Made it tough for you?
This is a tough one.
That's a tough one to follow. I'm not sure.
So I'm actually I'm a pretty renowned. Well, I shouldn't say renowned, but folks that know me the closest know I can cut a rug. I'm a pretty good dancer.
Really? Have you participated yet in?
Don't say it. Don't say it.
Yes, that's perfect.
Dancing for Future Stars?
Here's our candidate.
No, I haven't.
Have you been asked yet?
No. And can we edit this out of the podcast?
Chad Melvin, if you're listening, I think we might have have your next candidate coming up for that to raise a lot of money for the Boys and Girls Club.
There you go.
Judge Greenlee.
My wife and I are very involved in volunteer work and charity work with animal rescue.
Oh, okay. Very good. That's good to hear.
We knew that, though.
Well, y'all knew that.
I didn't know that. Well, I didn't know that.
But if people see me on the bench, they say, he has no heart. So they're shocked when they find that I have a tender spot for animals.
We put the animal cruelty cases in front of them for a reason.
You do have a little empathy, right?
Yeah, I do. It exists.
Empathy and compassion. So that's what we're talking about today, right? Judge Greenlee, what about a book or blog article or something you follow, another podcast you might listen to, or something that you might can share with our listeners that they might could check out?
Well, I mean, the podcast I used to follow, and I stopped when Gilbert Godfrey died, but the Amazing Colossal Podcast, I don't know if you ever listened to it. But
I did not know.
You know, it was one of my favorite ones because it talks about maybe old-time Hollywood and old-time entertainment going from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, which that's old-time now. I don't feel like it should be, but just about things like that, and that was a very entertaining podcast. Nostalgic
a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of nostalgia.
Very good. Yeah,
gotcha.
Sure, I can spell that, but I can say it.
A book, A River Runs Through It.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, great book. I like to pick it up every now and then and read it again.
Does the movie do the book justice?
I think so.
Okay,
very close. But then also, as far as a podcast, this one, of course.
Oh yeah, well, thank you.
No, Titus and Tate. Those are probably two of my favorite commentators on college basketball. Huge college basketball fan, and we were actually just listening to them on the way over here. But like listening to them, and my 4-year-old little boy loves ghost stories, and so we listen to a lot of ghost story podcasts.
Okay, that's interesting. I haven't done that yet, but we do like to do a ghost story every now and then, or a ghost tour when we travel around occasionally. Sheriff?
Mine, for the last probably 12, 13 years or so, I'm very involved in reading about emotional intelligence and why it matters more than IQ. And so that's basically our leadership philosophy. And so I spend a lot of time with Dr. Daniel Goleman's reading material on that. I try to focus on that, and it goes a lot to what we've been talking about here is we try to really educate people on emotions, because most people find themselves in front of the DA and the judge over emotions. And so we really try to focus on controlling our emotions. When emotions are high, reasoning is low. So I've really locked into that years ago. I'm actually an instructor now, I teach it. And so I do a lot of research and reading on that, and how people with a strong emotional intelligence are way better leaders than people who are really smart.
Yeah, self-awareness is such a huge thing for us here, and things that we've read and studied. We're always trying to do something. Like I'm sharing some leadership every Wednesday. I share a leadership podcast with our team here, and so we're always looking for. And I'm always reading something. So I'll check out that author and see what he has available. So listen, we appreciate you indulging us on those Gaston County questions. Most of them were okay. Most of them were good answers. There was one that wasn't so good. So, remember, this is a podcast about Gaston County and why the good things happening around Gaston County, and this is obviously one of those things. But stick with you, Sheriff Hawkins. Why, besides the work that we're talking about here with the Veterans Treatment Court, why would you say Gaston County is such a great place?
Well, I think it's a great place, and I'm a little biased because I'm from here. I just think that I've traveled all over the country, and something unique about Gaston County is I don't know. There's just a hometown feel, and there's really strong relationships. And I've been to a lot of other places, and I'm not saying, but just my involvement is just I feel like the relationships here are much stronger, and being around even other law enforcement agencies around the country, it doesn't seem like there's that feel of the camaraderie you talk about, and just those relationships. So I think we have strong relationships.
Well, that's great. Good answer.
Yeah, I think the people that build off of that, and the people make this county great. They make it go round. And it goes back to what the sheriff said, that hometown feel. We're not a small county.
No.
We're growing. We're one of the fastest growing areas in the country. But I think the reason for that is the people here, the environment that we've created. Despite our growth, we're still a hometown feel. I think people feel safe in this community, and we have good schools and good people running those schools, and Gaston's the place to be.
Absolutely, great answer. Sorry, you're third on that one.
Third on that one. That's fine. I have two. That's first, professionally speaking. Our courthouse. I've held court in the biggest courthouse in the state, Mecklenburg, and some of the smallest courthouses in the state. I've gone up to Caldwell and some of these counties even smaller, where they have one courtroom, an entire courthouse. Our courthouse is still like a small town courthouse, even though it is not. It is hugely populated. We talk, we get along, we can call each other if something comes up.
Collaborate,
try to work for the betterment of the process itself. And personally speaking, just this county in Gastonia, because I still do most things in Gastonia. I venture to Belmont occasionally. Cherryville's not really, as we all joke here, Cherryville's not close to anything.
It's okay, Judge. We wouldn't have.
I agree. Plus, I don't want to drive up that Dallas-Cherryville highway.
It's Dallas California highway.
Okay, Dallas California highway.
That's pretty good.
I spent 4 years away from here at East Carolina in Pitt County in Greenville, which is smaller, especially when the college population isn't there.
It's more evil too.
Yeah, sometimes. Of
Sorry,
course, you're in Raleigh, so let's not talk too much about that. But and then I spent 3 years in law school in Columbus, Ohio, which is a huge city.
Oh yeah.
Downtown Columbus, Ohio. And I decided to come back here. I could have gone other places to practice law, but I was like, this is the perfect mix between small and big.
Yeah.
It just is the perfect feel. Just a perfect feel.
Yeah, well, I appreciate those answers, and I agree. And we are fortunate, and it's the people, it's our location. It's if you have to go for some reason to cross the river, you can. I mean, I don't really care too much, but you can if you need to. So this last question, I think I say this every single episode, don't I? This is my favorite question, so I'll stick with you, Judge Greenlee, on this one. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Wow. It's one of these things that I tell myself constantly this: appreciate the moment you're in.
Yeah.
I think that as I get older, I wish I'd have maybe absorbed more or savored being 20 and just the daily experiences of being 20. I think we are younger. We're too much in a hurry to get older. And as I'm older, I'm not in a hurry to get older anymore. So that's just appreciate the moment you're in.
Yeah, I'm afraid it requires age and experience to have perspective. I'm afraid 20 is almost impossible to really have any perspective for that. Travis, how would you answer that one?
I'd say be intentional with your time, and not just relish in the moment, but also making sure that you're spending the time with the people and the things that matter most to you. I lost my dad when I was 26.
Really?
And so, if I could go back and have one more fishing trip with him, or one more time just mowing the grass together, it'd be wonderful. But just be intentional, making sure that you're spending those moments. They're fleeting, but spend them with the ones that matter most to you.
Very good.
So I became a law enforcement officer when I was 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot I could go back and tell myself. But most importantly, I think, is to have empathy and see things through other people's lens. Everything's not the way you see it.
Yeah, empathy is a terrific concept, but man, I found it's hard. I mean, it's just,
especially at 20.
Yeah. Well, I had zero empathy for anybody except for myself. You know, maybe that's called selfishness when I was 20. So listen, I appreciate those comments and answering those questions. So, you know, obviously the main point is we want to make our listeners aware of the Veterans Court, the work that you guys are doing, the potential for veterans to get additional help, additional shepherding, so to speak. So anything to add to that, is there any place they can go find more information out about the initiative, or anything you'd like to share before we wrap this one up?
They can contact my office, the district attorney's office, and reach out to me personally. There are folks that want to get involved either as a mentor, or maybe you're a clinician and you provide counseling and treatment or substance abuse treatment. You want to be on the team, give us a call.
Okay. Very good. Gentlemen, any other last words of wisdom before we sign off on this one? This has been really good.
This was enjoyable. I've never done a podcast before, so I did not know what to expect. I know you and your brother, but I'm like, well, it can't be that bad. And it actually was a very good experience. So
well, good. Listen, I appreciate those words. I also appreciate the work you guys are doing. And I mentioned this earlier. I mean, our veteran community, for me personally, is a special community. And I don't like to use the word deserves, but I think they do deserve that service deserves a little bit of attention, maybe over others. I mean,
absolutely.
You know, in the world we live in, you better be careful, right?
Yeah.
I almost feel like you can't say that kind of thing anymore, but I do. I do not have any. I mean, my brother-in-law is a Desert Storm veteran, and he served in the Navy. And
they do what most of us won't or can't.
Yes, absolutely. So again, I'm very grateful for the work. And when Roxanne called about this, I was like, yeah, let's talk about it. You know, let's get the word out. And so, matter of fact, if one veteran is helped or one volunteer, if one little thing happens from us talking for an hour today, then it's worth it. And
absolutely.
And so again, I'm grateful for. And I'm also grateful to all three of you for the service that you guys are giving to our community. Right, these things are required. Sometimes you guys are not doing easy work. Right, so I'm grateful for that. And I'm sure that our listeners are as well, even though you might not hear about it very often. Okay, so we're grateful for that. So as I normally do each week, I'm going to finish up with my own book recommendation and a quote or thought for the week. And I picked this book intentionally. It's one I read within the last couple of years, and it's called The Trident, The Forging and Reforging of a Navy SEAL Leader by a gentleman named Jason Redman. I mean, you can YouTube him and Google him. You will find all kinds of information. But I picked this book because he goes through, he was wounded severely overseas, serving in Afghanistan. And actually, I take that, I'm not sure if it was Afghanistan or Iraq. He served in both places. But it gets into a lot of his journey after that, and coming back into civilian life, so to speak, and starting a family. And it's just I thought it might be, it was one that made an impact on me. And for some reason I thought about it when I was kind of prepping for today's episode. And I was very specific on my quote or thought for the week as well. If anybody knows me personally, they know that I share something on, once a week I share something on social media. And it's just a thought for the week on Monday mornings. And this is the one I share every year on Memorial Day week. And it comes from FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, who said, "Those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy forget in time that men have died to win them." So to what I've heard from these gentlemen about the veteran community, and we just heard that they do what we can't do or we won't do. We have veterans who have done that, and some of them have paid the ultimate sacrifice for us, so we can sit here in an air-conditioned, heated room and talk about something that hopefully can maybe make a positive impact on that community. So to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast, and please don't hesitate to contact us here at our email, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, as I understand. All right. And please follow us on all social media platforms and give us a good 5-star rating. That helps the podcast get noticed. Thanks again to Sheriff Hawkins, Judge Greenlee, and our District Attorney Travis Page for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Naomi Hunt and Andy Amerson. Amy Anderson from GSM Services, and edited here locally by the Sumner Group. I'm your host, Stephen Long. And thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.